welcome back to the programme. Now, as you may know, it was a disaster in London yesterday. Well, in all kinds of places, really, because of what happened with the airlines. But we've been joined by Eoghan Corry this morning, and good afternoon to you. Or afternoon. We invited you in on the basis of Ryanair talking about maybe not being able to overfly Britain, but then yesterday the computers went down.
Nobody was overflying. It's a big deal. They say it's a power outage. We've had a series of these going back to last summer. Southwest Delta brought most of North American traffic to a halt. What happened with British Airways yesterday is that they ended up, cancelling effectively Heathrow and Gatwick flights, including the ones from Ireland. I mean, London City thankfully took off about 20 minutes ago, and one of the Heathrow flights, which is due to fly very soon, has been cancelled today. They are moving some of the planes around, but it's going to take days to get everything back in order. There's a very interesting, obviously the speculation the week of Manchester is this a cyber attack?
Yeah.
And all of that.
Well, it crosses your mind.
It's of more than passing interest to British Airways, because if it's a cyber attack, they're not liable to compensation. It's extraordinary circumstances under the famous 2004 261 regulation. And it's extraordinary circumstances. But if it's just the computer system goes down, it's not. So a lot of people will be looking at compensation ranging from €250 to €600 for cancelled flights. It's a big deal for British Airways. Lots of debate going on in the forums as to how can something as small bring down an entire aviation system. But as I say, Lufthansa, Air France were hit by something similar quite a little while ago. It's increasingly the case that obviously aviation depends on computer systems, but increasingly the case that the passengers are depending on it. Yeah. People whose apps weren't working, people the website gave an error message, even getting through security. By the time they got to the gate, the flight was gone. They're now looking for information, and the British Airways staff behind the counter have no information because there's nothing on their screens. We are so dependent on the systems working that when a major aviation hub like Heathrow gets hit by it, it's chaos.
I truly don't want to sound like a Luddite. I mean, I'm not. I do all the things that you're supposed to do in modern life.
You need to be a Luddite sometimes, yes.
But there is such an absolute trust in systems now. It's positively scary. I mean, we was just referring to it yesterday, even in the Department of Health in Britain.
And there's there's a generational thing going on, even in terms of how much of your personal information you share. A certain generation is very reluctant to let everything out. But the younger people are.
If we didn't have computerised systems to run airlines and manage bookings and so on, there'd be an awful lot less flying done. And it would be considerably more expensive.
You just couldn't cope. Back in the day, there was an office downtown for Aer Lingus where it was handwritten, and you checked
in there.
You checked in and you got the bus out there. But in those days, nobody flew. Everyone was on the boat to Holyhead, which brings us to what might happen if the Brexit thing comes through.
Which indeed Michael O'Leary referred to. We might be back on the boats. But just before we leave that, are there systems where you can have fallback?
The aviation people tell me there are. And then this happens every 3 months to a major airline. And they're also saying, they will always say that some of them will say that systems haven't been updated as quickly as they should have, and there are legacy systems. Of one of the more important ones concerning Irish listeners is the Aer Lingus system is basically a 1970s system.
That's very cheering.
That actually has served them well.
At least because green screen for Aer Lingus on the computer model.
It has served them well because they haven't been caught by any of the more trendy things that come in.
See, the thing about computers is, even if it's just personal, you don't take any notice of them and you use them, and then when they go down, you're snookered. And you curse them, but that doesn't get you anywhere.
And IATA have this, the international aviation people have this thing of moving completely paperless.
Yeah.
So in theory, everyone moving through, and particularly we've 2 trendy new terminals in Heathrow where there isn't a check-in desk. I mean, I used to say about Terminal 5, it's wonderful, but whoever designed it never met my Auntie May. They assume, it's all designed by people with acne, you assume that everyone has has
a
an app on their
smartphone,
phone,
yeah,
and
yeah.
everything, the codes will be read, and you put your shoes in the place, and the photograph is registered to your boarding pass, and everything works perfectly until something goes wrong.
Right.
Until somebody arrives who has no clue what this is all about.
Yeah.
Which happens every day.
Yes,
and there is nobody
absolutely.
to speak to. You have
It is handy having that technology for the people who want to use it.
Yeah.
But a lot of people, like, I would still print off my tickets. I still actually, I don't actually use the machines. I prefer to go to the desk. And I am of this generation that should be all technology.
Yeah.
But certain things, I prefer
Right.
just to do it the old-fashioned
bit
way.
of paper. There was a big interview with Michael O'Leary in the Business Post today, where he was very Michael O'Leary-ish.
He's a quotes machine. He was actually talking at his briefing last week about shooting cyclists. You know, does
Yeah.
Dublin Meet a Metro
He was
turns
shooting
into...
some people today too, but I can't remember who was to be shot.
In between all the bluster, a lot of sense comes
Yeah.
out. And one of the things that he is really ramping up, and he's virtually the only one doing it, is aviation agreements are not the same as trade agreements. When we've a trigger for March the 19th, 2019, when Brexit, or I love the Irish translation of Brexit, it's even more emphatic, it's Breat-imeacht. You know, the brats are imachting out of Europe. But when Breat-imeacht hits on March the 19th, 2019, aviation is in danger of coming to a halt. The public position he's been putting out is he needs to know a year in advance, he needs to know next March that all of that, if those agreements are going to be replaced by something workable. In reality, he says he can do it with about 3 months to go, but he has to stop selling flights at some stage, and all the other airlines will have to do the same. He's the one making most noise about it. What he says is that what alarms him most is that aviation is not being mentioned by Theresa May either in her Brexit statements or in her election policy. It's not being prioritised, and it's not like the trade agreement where the European Court judgment recently said that one bloc can negotiate for all the countries.
Yeah.
It is going to be fighting with 27 different European countries and 170 aviation agreements for around the world, which have been negotiated by Europe and will no longer apply to Britain. A lot of negotiation to be done, and not enough time and not enough headspace being put into it. And he did use the phrase, we could all be back in boats for a few weeks. He also said something interesting. Lufthansa, Air France, they have very little exposure to Britain. It's about 8% exposure, as opposed to what he does, and Ryanair and IAG, obviously, or EasyJet and IAG. But he says that Lufthansa and Air France are lobbying heavily in Europe to try and make aviation a pressure point. The ordinary voter in Hull isn't going to really be into high finance and, you know, what happens in the city.
Yeah.
Cheap holidays in Spain, it's what's going to hit them. So you could end up with Europe using this aviation as a measure to bring it home to the ordinary English voter. This is what you voted for, guys.
What is the detail of it? Is it air traffic control? Is it licensing? Can you overfly Britain? What is the detail?
Overflight won't be affected. It's the reciprocal rights of flying into a certain number of airports that goes between two countries. It used to be very convoluted. Airlines used to stop somebody else coming in unless they could actually get their national carrier into it. Would be, you know, an agreement between Aer Lingus and Air France, and then the legacy carriers went out of spin. It took a while for the agreements to catch up, but we got something wonderful in the 80s called Open Skies. It effectively invented Ryanair, brought them from being, you know, Waterford to Luton to 130 million passengers last year. So he capitalised on Open Skies. Now, what is going to change is that to keep Open Skies, Britain is being asked to sign up to the European Court of Justice rulings and to free movement, which those of us who remember how angry that debate last summer was, were the two things that they forcefully were voting against. Theresa May is going to have to face a big choice here. Does she actually throw out what she's been telling her supporters for the sake of keeping the aviation agreement? And if she doesn't do that, how far will Europe go to yield Open Skies to somebody who wants wants to be a member of the golf club without paying the fee.
Right.
And the message, the mood music in Brussels certainly is that they don't want to push very far there.
Olivia, you want to
I'm
come
just wondering from Owen, because we've had a lot of interest. We've had all the politics and policies of where Europe is going, and I think people are becoming more anxious about the operational detail of how it's going to work when it happens. Discussions on the customs union side from people wondering, how will my truck get in and out of the border? What does that encompass from paperwork to waiting times? And there's some kind of comfort music coming in different quarters that we won't have a cliff edge, that we will have transition. And does transition apply to the airline sector?
Yeah, well, that's what Yanis Varoufakis was going to advocate if I had got on to that, was that you kick the can down the road essentially and do a Norway deal and say we'll finalise it in 7 years' time.
Norway sign up for the European Court of Justice rulings, and that's what you do to get in. And the customs union.
I can't. I'm sorry, I'm out of time. I'll be thrown out of the brownies. Listen, I want to thank all of our contributors to the programme today very, very much indeed. That's all we have time for. On sound, Heather Carpenter. Researchers were Katrina McFadden and Michelle Brown. Broadcast coordinator Charlotte Holland. And today's series producer Margaret Curley. That's all from us. Until next weekend, a very good day to you.